Myra's knife slipped on the frozen meat, nicking her thumb as the pup's desperate whine clawed through the cabin's drafty walls. She sucked the blood bead away, ignoring the sting, and scraped the scraps into a chipped bowl, her daily offering to the scrawny beast she'd dragged from the snow last winter. With trembling hands, she pricked her palm deeper, letting 3 drops fall into the mix, whispering the half-forgotten words her mother had taught her. Blood binds, life lends, stay through the end. The pup lunged at the bowl the instant she set it down, gulping like it was his last meal, his ribs stark under matted fur. She watched him devour it, her chest tight with the fragile lie of family this ritual bought her. One more dawn he chose her door over the wild's jaws. A low growl rumbled outside, not the pup's. Myra froze, bowl still in hand, as shadows sliced across the frost-laced window. Boots crunched snow, deliberate and heavy 4 sets. Her pulse hammered. Black wolves. King's enforcers, never this far into the fringe woods unless blood was owed. She shoved the pup behind a crate, his tail thumping confusion against her leg, and snatched her shawl as the door shuddered under a fist. "Open, Omega," barked a voice, gravel-rough and commanding. The latch splintered inward before she could twist it, and 4 men in black cloaks shouldered through, their eyes gleaming wolf gold in the dim light. The captain at the front was tallest, broad-shouldered with a scar bisecting his jaw, his hand resting on a silver-chained whip coiled at his belt. Rowan Vale, she'd heard the name in village whispers, the king's hound who never failed a hunt. Myra backed against the hearth, heat searing her spine. "What do you want? This is free land." Vale's gaze pinned her, unblinking, sweeping from her bare feet to the wild tangle of her hair. His wolves fanned out, blocking the door and windows, their breath sinking like a pack scenting weakness. "Imperial patrol. King's law calls for inspection." He stepped closer, the floorboards groaning, and jerked his chin at her collarbone. "Show the sigil. All Omegas bear it, marks the dangerous ones for service. Lift your shift." Her hand flew to her throat, fingers curling over the faded birthmark there, a swirling scar like spilled ink, the one she'd hidden under ash and dirt since childhood. Panic surged, hot and choking, dragging up the memory, tiny hands clutching a trader's cart as her pack's alpha shoved her forward. "She's marked. Take her, save the rest." Sold for grain sacks, left screaming in the mud. Used, always used. "No," she spat, voice cracking. "Get out." Vale's lip curled, but his eyes narrowed, not cruel, assessing. "Refuse and we drag you. Sigil or not, the edict hunts you." One wolf kicked the crate aside. The pup yelped, skittering into view, meat-smeared muzzle low to the ground. Myra lunged, scooping him up, his nails digging into her arm as he trembled against her chest. "Leave him be," she cradled tighter, glaring. "He's no threat." The captain's hand twitched toward his whip, but he held. Nothing lives free on the fringe if it draws patrols. "Hand it over." Questions burned in their stares now, about her past, her solitude, why an Omega scraped by alone without pack or mate. She clamped her jaw, the old terror coiling. Answer and they'd own her story, twisted into chains. "I have no past for you, no pack. Just this cabin, go back to your king." Vale pulled a sealed parchment from his cloak, the black wax stamped with a raven's claw night court seal. He broke it with a thumbnail, unrolling the edict under her nose. "Read or hear it. By the right of binding, enacted under King Corvin Alistair's blood oath, all unmarked Omegas within the Shadow Realms must present at court. Your sigil flags you as unbound peril, fertile, disruptive. Fail to appear by dusk tomorrow and the wolves claim forfeit, home, goods, life." His voice dropped, edged with something almost reluctant. "The king's law spares no one, not even fringe strays." Myra's arms tightened around the pup, his heartbeat frantic against her ribs. The night court, vampire heart of the realm, where humans like her vanished into rituals and thrall collars. She'd skirted its reach her whole life, trading pelts at the village edge, dodging patrols, building this scrap of nothing with her hands. King's reach meant surrender, meant becoming property again. But the pup whined, his warmth seeping through her shift, the only thing that had chosen her back. They'd seize him, starve him in some cage, or worse, blood sport for the wolves. Her knife lay on the table, glinting. Mercy now, or condemn him to their jaws. The decision sliced through her like the blade's edge. "Fine," she rasped, shoving past the nearest wolf toward the door. "I'll go, but he's mine." Vale blocked her, iron grip on her wrist, not bruising but unyielding. "The beast stays." "Quarantine for strays." "No." She yanked free, breath ragged, storming out into the snow-whipped clearing. The wolves followed, cloaks snapping in the wind, but she dropped to her knees by the birch grove, pup clutched close. Her free hand plunged the knife into the soft earth, digging fast, frozen clods flying. "You won't touch him." The pup licked her chin, trusting as the hole deepened. Vale loomed over her, silent now, his wolves exchanging glances. She slid a shallow cut along her palm, more blood for the ritual, final this time, and pressed it to his muzzle. "Blood binds," she murmured, voice breaking. "Rest through the end." The knife flashed quick, clean into his throat. He spasmed once, eyes glazing, then stilled warm against her. Myra lowered him into the grave, covering him with dirt and snow, her hands stained red-black. Tears froze on her cheeks, but she stood, chin lifted, facing Vale's shadowed stare. "He's buried. No claim for you. Take me to your king." The captain's jaw tightened, a flicker crossing his face, pity, respect. He gestured sharply, and a wolf horse was led forward, saddled and snorting. "Mount." "Court's a hard ride." As she swung up, gripping the mane, the power of it crashed in her choice, sealing her fate. The king's court waited, ancient laws coiling like the sigil on her skin, dragging her from solitude into the monster's lair. But she'd bury 1,000 more before letting them take what was hers. Vale mounted beside her, his presence a wall of muscle and command, urging the patrol into motion. Snow churned under hooves as they plunged toward the shadowed tree line, the cabin shrinking behind, a grave for her fragile peace. The pup's weight lingered in her arms, a ghost ache, fueling the stubborn fire in her gut. Whatever awaited in the night court, she wouldn't bow. Not to wolves, not to kings. They'd learn that soon enough. The patrol burst through the night court's obsidian gates, hooves shattering ice into razor shards that sliced Myra's exposed cheeks. Courtiers in velvet and bone-white masks lined the courtyard, their laughter a venomous hiss as Vale yanked her from the saddle, her bound wrists jerking her forward into the torchlit fray. "Filthy edge rat," one sneered, fangs glinting. "Omega chattel ripe for the binding altar, law decrees it. Unbound scents like yours are forfeit for the throne's alliances." Myra stumbled, boots slipping on blood-flecked stone, the air thick with incense and rot that clawed her throat. They dragged her past a ceremony in full swing. Chained omegas on marble plinths, wrists slit to mingle blood with ritual wine, courtiers dipping goblets and toasting bindings eternal, while the victim's eyes dulled to hollow surrender. Shame burned through her like silver, sold once by her pack, now this, a living auction block under vampire law that branded her kind as tools for calming feral hungers or sealing pacts. She clenched her jaw, refusing the sob rising in her chest, walls slamming down as she went limp, dead weight in their grip. No tears, no begging, they'd get nothing. High in the throne spire, King Corvin Alistair stared into the ritual glass, its surface rippling like quicksilver under his palm. Myra's face filled the scry, stubborn chin lifted, eyes flint-hard amid the court's jeers, and something twisted in his gut, sharper than thirst. Centuries of iron rule had taught him mercy was a blade turned inward, yet her scent report from the wolves lingered in his senses, wild earth and quiet defiance, a balm against the court's snarling factions. He snapped his fingers. A shadow detached from the wall. Vale. House arrest in the eastern wing. No cells, guarded but untouched. Rowan Vale halted mid-stride in the courtyard, the king's missive burning in his fist like a brand. Courtiers froze, murmurs erupting, mercy for an Omega cur. The cells weep empty, as he cut Myra's bonds with a dagger's edge, close enough her skin didn't break. This way, he growled low, steering her from the throng without flourish, his bulk a shield against probing claws. She rubbed her wrists, glaring up at him, but followed, better a cage with walls than the open maw below. Whispers chased them, the king's whim complicating bids already whispered for her blood. In the grand hall, the faction led by Lady Aloan surged forward, her gown a cascade of raven feathers, voice slicing the vaulted air. "Sire, this Omega's unbound status demands auction. Bind her to the eastern barons, quell their rebellions with her calming scent." Tradition and law, cheers rippled from her allies, fangs bared in greed. Corvin lounged on his throne of fused bone and iron, shadows pooling at his feet like hounds, his face a mask of regal chill. "The vote stalls," he said flatly, gaze sweeping the hall without landing. "I decide her fate." Murmurs swelled to outrage, but his wolves growled in unison, silencing them. Privately, he signaled his steward, protections absolute, no sales, no viewings. Her presence already steadied the air, he'd not let them shatter it for pawns. Myra slammed the wing's oak door behind her, the chamber's velvet drapes and silvered mirrors closing like a tomb. A guard's bundle slumped on the canopied bed, tattered scarf reeking of pine and wolf musk, and beneath it, her pup's silver bowl, etched with tiny paw prints, salvaged from the cabin's ruins. Rage ignited. They thought trinkets bought submission. She hurled the bowl at the door, metal clanging loud enough to echo down the hall. "I'm not your fucking property," she bellowed, voice cracking stone walls. "Take your scraps and choke on them." Fists pounded outside, guards snarling orders, but she yanked the scarf to her face, inhaling the pup's faint milk scent clinging to its threads, tears finally spilling hot. Alone but not broken, not yet. Corvin's chambers adjoined the wing's hidden passage, the ritual glass now dark. Her shout pierced the stone, raw and unyielding, stirring the void in his chest he'd long ignored. Loneliness clawed deeper than hunger. Wards and wolves filled his court, but none pierced the isolation of command. He rose, summoning a young wolf shifter from his personal pack, slight, silver-furred in half-form. "Take this." He pressed a sealed vial into its paw, essence distilled from the pup's abandoned blankets captured by Vale's riders. Presented at her door, gauge her every flinch, breath, spark, report directly. The wolf nodded, vanishing into shadow. A test, not force, but probe. If her reactions mirrored the scout's tales, calming his court's edge, he'd bind her path to his own. Consent or no, the law allowed maneuvering. Tenderness, he'd learned, demanded risk. The wolf scratched at Myra's door, a low whine threading the wood. She froze mid-pace, heart slamming pup. She cracked it open, fangs bared beyond the threshold, but the shifter thrust the vial forward, cork glinting. "From the king." "For the little one sent." Myra snatched it, uncorking with trembling fingers. The familiar milky warmth flooded her nose, buckling her knees to the floorboards. Whimpers escaped, raw grief for the left-behind warmth, her body curling protective around the vial as sobs racked her frame. The wolf watched, unblinking, amber eyes cataloging the flush on her cheeks, the instinctive clutch Omega reactions unbound, potent enough to soothe even royal thirst. In the hall, courtiers clustered like vultures, Aloan's hiss carrying. A private scent test. "The king's hoarding her for himself, stalling our bids reeks of favoritism." Wolves shifted uneasily, loyalties fracturing under the whispers. Vale gripped his sword hilt, eyes on the wing's door, the mercy he'd enforced now a wedge in the court's brittle peace. Corvin dismissed the glass's echo, but her pain lingered in his veins, a mirror to his own buried fractures. The court simmered, factions coiling tighter. Her arrival had replaced auction knives with subtler blades, his own included. Vulnerability tempted, but control was survival. For now, he'd watch, wait, protect from afar until her fire demanded more. Myra's wrists burned under the efficient's grip as he yanked the silken cord toward the ceremonial post, its silver threads glinting like fangs in the torchlight. The court chamber thrummed with shadowed faces, vampires in velvet and lace, their eyes hungry for the spectacle of her marking as court property. "Kneel," the efficient hissed, voice oily with ritual authority, "and accept the binding, Omega." No, the word ripped from her throat, raw and unyielding. She wrenched her arms free, the cord snapping taut before whipping back like a struck serpent. Gasps rippled through the hall, courtiers leaning forward in their alcoves, fangs peeking from parted lips. "I won't be led like a lamb to your slaughter. Touch me again and I'll break your fingers." The efficient froze, his face paling to ash. Silence crashed down, broken only by the distant drip of wax from the chandelier above. Myra stood tall, heart hammering against her ribs, the weight of every stare pinning her like stakes. She could feel the king's presence at the dais, Corvin Alistair, unmoving, his irritation a cold draft slithering across her skin. He didn't speak, but his gaze bored into her, promising retribution later in the dark. Whispers erupted like dry leaves in wind. "Insolent cur. She defies the ancient right." Factions shifted in the shadows, some smirking at her folly, others recalculating, eyes darting to the king. Protection from him had always been a blade's edge. Now her fire made it a cage, his shadow her only shield against their knives. Corvin rose from his throne without a sound, the black wolves at his flanks tensing like coiled springs. The court parted as he descended the steps, his boots silent on the marble. He seized her elbow in the antechamber moments later, the heavy door slamming shut behind them, sealing out the murmurs. His touch was iron, unyielding, but his voice cut colder. "You think defiance buys you freedom here, Myra Thane. This court devours the weak. Comply or you'll starve before dawn." She jerked against his hold, chin lifting to meet his eyes, storm gray, centuries deep, flickering with something sharper than anger. Hunger, maybe. Or the ghost of it. "Your rituals don't own me. I've survived worse than your silk nooses." His lips thinned, jaw clenching as he released her with deliberate slowness, the imprint of his fingers blooming red on her skin. Rowan, the captain of the wolves, materialized from the gloom, broad shoulders filling the doorway, his face a mask of scarred loyalty. "Monitor her every breath. No privileges until she bends." Rowan nodded once, eyes flicking to Myra with the barest flicker of something unreadable pity. The king swept out, leaving frost in his wake. Hours bled into night in the tower cell they called her quarters, the single window barred with silver-laced iron. Myra paced, fists clenched, until a scrape at the door halted her. Rowan slipped inside, palm cupped around a scrap of smoked venison, its scent rich and forbidden. He pressed it into her hand without a word, glancing at the corner where the pup whimpered softly from its crate, the scruffy wolfkin she'd smuggled in, half-starved like her. "For the little one," he muttered, voice gravel-low. "King's orders chafe, but pups don't deserve the grind." Then he was gone, door clicking shut. Myra sank to her knees, tearing the meat for the pup's eager jaws. Rowan's mercy cracked something in her chest, a sliver of trust amid the cage. She wouldn't break, but she could test the bars. Dawn's gray light filtered through the window next morning as courtiers gathered in the atrium for the daily parade. Myra stepped into the circle unbidden, robes loose on her frame, refusing the jeweled collar the attendants thrust forward. "I'm not your trophy," she said flatly, voice carrying over the silk-shod feet. "Parade your own dead dreams." Scorn crashed back hisses, laughter like shattering glass. A lady in crimson sneered, "Filthy edge-rat, grovel or rot." Privileges stalled sharp. No meals that day, water turned brackish, the door locked twice as long. Bruises from the night's scuffle throbbed, but Myra held her ground, chin high as guards dragged her back. In the quiet of evening she pulled the silver bowl from her satchel, the dented heirloom from her cabin days, etched with faded pack runes. Her fingers trembled as she set it on the window ledge, filling it with water from her ration. The pup nosed it, lapping gently, its warmth pressing against her leg. This bowl had held her first stew for the villagers, her fragile trades. Now it anchored her here, talisman against loss. If they took the pup or her scraps of self, it would shatter. Belonging wasn't chains, it was this quiet claim. 2 nights later, the minor courtier struck. Lord Eamon, a weasel-faced vampire with ambitions too big for his lace cuffs, cornered her in the shadowed gallery during a feast. Courtiers lounged nearby, wine chalices poised, watching. "Kneel, Omega," Eamon drawled, shoving her shoulder toward the floor. His nails lengthened, pricking her collarbone. "Or shall I mark you myself? The king's pet needs housebreaking." Myra staggered but swung back, fist clipping his jaw. "Touch me and—" Eamon's hand cracked across her face, splitting her lip, blood welling hot. Laughter swelled from the onlookers. Then the air thickened, shadows coiling like smoke. Corvin was there in a blur, his hand clamping Eamon's throat, lifting the courtier off his feet. Fangs bared, eyes blazing crimson, he hurled Eamon into the wall with bone-cracking force. "She is under my law," the king snarled, voice thunderlow. "Touch her again and your line ends tonight." Eamon crumpled, wheezing apologies as wolves dragged him away. The gallery fell silent, courtiers averting eyes, recalculating once more. Myra pressed a hand to her throbbing cheek, tasting copper, trapped between gratitude and fury. The king's protection burned like manacles, shielding her from their venom, but chaining her deeper to his will. His gaze met hers across the space, lingering too long, a breath-held pause that stirred the air between them. Starvation shadowed his features, not for blood, but for the connection her defiance teased. She turned away first, retreating to her tower, the silver bowl waiting like a promise she couldn't trust. The pup curled at her feet, but the quartz blades whispered closer, her fire drawing them all. Corvin watched her go from the gallery's edge, Rowan's report burning in his mind. The pup fed, rules bent. Her refusal echoed in his veins, a fracture against his control. Centuries of iron rule, and this Omega unraveled it with a glance. He clenched his fist, nails drawing blood from his palm. Tenderness tempted, but the throne demanded dominance. Yet as factions coiled tighter, Eamon's allies plotting in whispers, he knew her spark demanded more than watching. Protection was his cage too, vulnerability its key. For now he'd wield the law sharper, bind her closer, until her stubborn heart forced his hand. Myra barred the door behind her, sliding down against it, breath ragged. The king's intervention replayed, his raw power a storm that saved her, but at what cost? Her lips swelled, privileges already fraying further, whispers of isolation growing. She reached for the bowl, tracing its runes, the pup's nose nudging her palm. Family wasn't given, it was clawed for. But in this court, every claw mark tied her tighter to the monster who starved alone on his throne. Rowan lingered in the hall outside, fist hovering before dropping. The king's orders chained him, but her eyes, fierce, fractured, mirrored the boy he'd been when Corvin spared his kin. Small mercies built cracks in walls. He'd watch closer, bend what he could. The court simmered into midnight, Myra's defiance a spark in dry tinder. Courtiers plotted with new caution, her link to the king a double-edged blade. Protection felt like possession, her freedom traded for his shadow. But in the bowl's reflection, her resolve gleamed unbroken. Rain lashed the stone corridors like claws, thunder rumbling through the night court's bowels. Myra pressed her back to the slick wall, heart slamming as she edged past Rowan's post. His silhouette slumped in the alcove, head bowed against the gale, howling through arrow slits. She couldn't wait for his rounds to shift. The pup's whimpers had clawed into her dreams, faint but insistent from the outer kennels where they dumped it after the rite. She darted into the storm-swept courtyard, wind tearing at her thin shift, mud sucking at her bare feet. Lightning cracked. illuminating the black wolves circling a lone figure by the far wall. Corvin, drenched and unyielding, his white shirt plastered to his chest like a second skin. The beasts flanked him, hackles raised, but they didn't snap. They leaned into his touch, whining low as he murmured to them, voice lost in the roar. Myra froze, breath caught. He shouldn't be here, exposed like this, not the king who commanded from thrones of bone. But his hand trembled on the alpha wolf's muzzle, eyes distant, hollowed by shadows deeper than the night. "You," he said without turning, voice cutting the storm like a blade. The wolf's head snapped toward her, eyes glowing amber, defying guards again. For what a half-dead stray, she straightened, chin lifting despite the cold knot in her gut. No use lying, his senses would shred it. It's starving. Like everything else here. Water streamed down her face, but she held his gaze as he finally pivoted, rain carving paths over high cheekbones, fangs glinting briefly in a grimace. Corvin stepped closer, wolves parting like smoke. Up close, the power radiating off him pressed like a physical weight, centuries of unchallenged rule, hunger coiled beneath. Yet his eyes, storm gray and fractured, flicked to the kennel shadows where the pup's cries pierced the gale. It weakens the pack. Distraction invites challenge. Then cull it properly, she shot back, voice steady even as fear licked her spine. Not leave it to drown. He loomed now, close enough she felt the chill of his skin warring with the rain's warmth. The wolves growled low, but he silenced them with a flick of his wrist. "Why, truth, Myra Thane. No games, or Rowan drags you back in chains." The demand hung heavier than the storm, his proximity a cage of muscle and shadow. She swallowed, the words she'd buried since childhood surging up, raw, unwanted. No one had ever asked, not like this, not with eyes that saw past her walls. "Because my pack left me like that. 5 years old, sold to slavers for grain during famine. I was the stray, whimpering in the mud while they walked away. I swore, if I ever had power over something helpless, I wouldn't abandon it. Never again. And I won't be taken like that either. Not by you, not by anyone." Silence crashed harder than thunder. Corvin's face shifted, fangs retracting, shoulders easing a fraction as if her words had struck a vein. He exhaled, ragged, turning half away to rake a hand through soaked black hair. "Gods. I know that abandonment." His voice cracked, low and unsteady, gaze dropping to the wolves pressing against his legs. "Centuries ago I clawed this throne from my brother's corpse, but every night since the hunger, it whispers. One slip and I lose them all. The court, the pack, myself. I'm alone in it, Myra, always alone." The confession hung between them, raw as an open wound. Lightning forked overhead, etching his isolation in stark white, king of nightmares, starved for a tether. Myra's chest tightened. This wasn't the monster of whispers, but a man fraying at the edges, wolves his only solace. He straightened abruptly, eyes locking on hers with renewed steel, though softer at the corners. "The pup stays." "Rowan," his bellow cut the storm. The captain materialized from the shadows, cloak whipping, face etched with surprise. "Move its shelter to the guarded wing by dawn. No exposure. And no public rights, no brands, no oaths forced on her. She's under my ward, private law." Rowan blinked rain from his lashes, glancing between them. "Sire, the factions, now," Corvin snarled, but his hand brushed Myra's arm, light, hesitant, gone in a breath, protective, almost tender. "Or join the strays." Rowan bowed sharp, vanishing into the gale. Corvin lingered, posture altered, less tower, more shield as he studied her. "Go inside, before you drown us both." She nodded, pulse racing, slipping past without another word. The wolves watched her go, tails low as if weighing her worth. By dawn, whispers slithered through the court's veins like venom. Myra felt them in the great hall's hush as she took her seat at the long obsidian table, Rowan's shadow at her flank. Servants averted eyes, fangs clicking nervously behind gloved hands. The pup was safe. She'd heard the muffled yips from the inner wing, but the king's mercy had cracked the facade. Lady Alowan, silver-haired leader of the blood purists, leaned forward first, her gown a cascade of midnight silk. Astray in the guarded wing, majesty. And no branding for the Omega, precedent shatters like glass. Corvin sat at the head, unmoving as carved marble, crown of thorns glinting under torchlight. Private Ward, my law. Lord Draven, rival faction head with his cadre of warlords, smirked from the shadows, fingers drumming a chalice. Mercy breeds weakness, sire, or opportunity. Is she pawn or pet? We could use her, bind the outer packs through her blood. Myra's fists clenched under the table. They spoke over her like chattel, but Corvin's gaze flicked to her, warning, promise, before he rose. She is under my protection. Deviate and face the wolves. The hall erupted in murmurs, factions splintering visibly, purists hissing resentment at the break from ritual, warlords eyeing her as leverage, a new chess piece in their games. Rowan shifted beside her, hand on his sword hilt, his blunt face tight with conflict. "This'll cost him," he muttered low for her ears only. "King's word binds, but loyalty frays." She met his eyes, seeing the crack loyal captain, yet his mercy for the pup mirrored hers. "Then why enforce it?" he grunted, glancing at Corvin's rigid back. "Because he saved my kin once, doesn't mean it's free." The session dragged into dusk, plots coiling tighter. Eloin cornered courtiers in alcoves, promising alliances against the softening throne. Draven's wolves prowled closer to Myra's path, testing boundaries. Rowan rebuffed with bared teeth. Word of the midnight slip had leaked, how else? Turning her into the spark. Protection chained her deeper into the web, freedom's illusion sharpening to a blade. That night, alone in her chamber, Myra paced the fur rugs, storm's echo fading to drips. The mirror caught her reflection, stubborn jaw, eyes haunted by the king's stuttered truth. Not monster but man, loneliness a mirror to her own scars. He'd bared a fracture for her sake, wolves his children in the dark. Choosing her meant risking it all, court unity cracking under his tenderness. Across the court, in the throne room's chill heart, Corvin dismissed his guards with a wave, sinking into the seat carved from ancient yew. The wolves curled at his feet, but their warmth couldn't touch the void her words had widened. Saving her, sheltering the pup, shielding her from rights, would bleed his rule dry. Factions scented blood, whispers of softness could topple centuries of iron grip. Yet her wound echoed his, abandoned, defiant, craving family without surrender. For the first time, control felt like the true cage. He pressed a fist to his chest, hunger twisting, not for blood, but for the reckless hope she'd ignited. The cost mounted, but turning back, unthinkable. Myra pressed her palm to the door, resolve hardening. The court simmered toward fracture, her link the fuse. But in that shared midnight scar, something shifted, perception cracking open, binding them in mutual ruin. Myra shoved the heavy door open, the throne room's chill slamming into her like a fist. Nobles in shadowed silks turned, their eyes glinting with hunger. The auctioneer's gavel already poised over her forged papers. Rights to her body, her blood, bartered like scrap. Before the hammer fell, Corvin's voice cracked the air from the dais, deep and unyielding. "By the right of eternal wardship, I claim Myra Thane as mine under ancient law. The auction ends." Gasps rippled through the hall, fangs bared in shock. Myra froze mid-step, her hand still on the doorframe, pulse thundering in her ears. The pup whimpered against her chest, clutched tight in her arms, but she couldn't tear her gaze from the king. He stood tall amid his black wolf guards, crown of thorns casting jagged shadows, his face a mask of iron control. Yet his eyes, those storm-dark eyes, locked on hers with something raw, almost pleading. Wardship. The word clawed at her gut, echoing the pack's betrayal. Sold as an Omega pup to settle debts, branded property to be used and discarded. This was no salvation. It was chains forged anew, his law snapping shut around her freedom. "You bastard," she snarled, shoving forward through the parting crowd, ignoring the murmurs of insolent human, "and she dares." The auctioneer scrambled back, papers crumpling under a guard's boot. Myra thrust a finger at Corvin, voice breaking with fury. Ward. You think that's protection? It's ownership. You've stolen my choice just like they did, paraded me for bids, then this. Her chest heaved, tears hot but unshed, the pup squirming in terror. She wouldn't bow, wouldn't let him see how his gaze stripped her bare, stirring that treacherous ache for belonging amid the rage. Corvin descended the dais in 3 strides, his presence parting the nobles like smoke. Up close the power imbalance hit like a wave, his height, his scent of midnight frost and blood wine, the way the air thickened around him. He stopped inches away, voice low for her alone. It cancels the sale. You're safe from them. His hand twitched toward her shoulder, then fell, respecting the invisible line she drew with her glare. Safe, Myra spat, stepping back, cradling the pup higher. Under your thumb, I refuse. Release me, or I'll walk out that door and take my chances with the wolves outside. The court held its breath, loyalties fracturing in the silence. She saw it in their faces, some nodding approval at her fire, others sneering at the challenge to their king. His jaw tightened, a flicker of hurt cracking his facade before he masked it. The right binds until I release it, for your life, Myra. He turned to the hall then, voice booming. The claim stands. Dissenters speak now. Silence answered, thick with resentment. But Myra saw the cost already, whispers of rebellion coiling like vipers. She whirled, storming toward the side archway leading to guest quarters, the pup's tiny heart racing against her. Betrayal burned hotter than fear. She'd glimpsed his loneliness last night, that shared scar of abandonment, and still he'd caged her. In the king's private solar, firelight danced on obsidian walls as Rowan slammed the door shut behind him. Corvin stood at the window, fists clenched on the sill, overlooking the court's torchlit sprawl. The captain's boots echoed, blunt and urgent. You bound her without consent, sire. She's no threat, she fears control like fire. This right, it's a leash on a wild thing. Corvin didn't turn, his reflection gaunt in the glass. Centuries of isolation gnawed at him, the throne's weight a hollow throne without trust. The auction was set. Omegas like her fetch blood prices that arm rivals. I chose the lesser evil. Wardship keeps her breathing, gives her palace walls instead of chains. Rowan stepped closer, voice edged with rare defiance. Lesser evil. She's withdrawing already, plotting escape. You saved my kin once, pulled us from the border wars. I owe you blood. But this, it reeks of the old kings, forcing loyalty. She's not yours to shape. A muscle ticked in Corvin's jaw, guilt twisting like hunger pangs. He craved her fire, the way it pierced his solitude, but power demanded sacrifice. I won't turn her against her will. The law protects until she sees reason. He met Rowan's gaze finally, the captain's loyalty a rare anchor. Watch her. Ensure no harm comes. Rowan nodded grimly, but doubt shadowed his eyes as he left. Alone, Corvin pressed a hand to his chest, where the beast stirred, not for blood, but for the connection he'd just fractured. Dawn bled red through the palace stables when the attack came. Myra had retreated there hours earlier, barricading herself in the pup's makeshift shelter, a straw-lined stall she'd claimed for the trembling creature. The pup, a runt wolf shifter she'd rescued from poachers, nosed at her hand now, whining. She'd slip out tonight, find a trader's cart, vanish into the forest edge where her cabin waited. No more claims, no more kings. A crash shattered the quiet, flames erupted along the stable wall, oily smoke billowing from thrown vials. Shouts rose, for the old blood. No human wards, rival faction. Lord Draven's sigil burned into the wood, a symbolic strike to paint Corvin weak, protecting a reject Omega over noble pride. The pup yelped, bolting into the corner as fire licked the straw. Myra lunged, scooping embers with her cloak to smother them, coughing as heat blistered her palms. Stay down, she gasped to the pup, heart slamming. Hooves thundered outside, Rowan's wolves charging in, axes quenching the blaze, but the damage smoked. Her sanctuary ruined, the court's fracture public now. Nobles would rally to Draven's cry, demanding Corvin prove his strength by casting her out. Rowan burst through the gate, eyes scanning. Myra hurt, he knelt, checking the pup as she nodded curtly, pride stinging. Draven's men, the king's claim lit the fuse. She pulled away, voice steel. Then unclaim me. Let them have their rebellion, I'll be gone by dusk. He hesitated, contradiction warring in his blunt face. Won't be that easy. Corvin arrived minutes later, cloak singed at the edges, face thunderous. Guards dragged 2 singed assassins before him, but his eyes fixed on Myra, then the shivering pup. The court intrigue boiled over, petitions already flooding for her expulsion, Draven's faction swelling. To protect her now meant escalation, bleeding his alliances dry. In the shadowed alcove off the throne room, Corvin met Lord Eamon, a minor noble with wavering loyalties and a taste for favors. The man bowed low, sly eyes gleaming. "Sire," Draven whispers of weakness. "Quell it, how?" Corvin's voice was velvet over steel. "Swear your house to expose Draven's spies. In return, I grant you the eastern vineyards, prime bloodvine territory." A gray bargain. The land was contested, ceding it cost him political capital, thinning his inner circle's trust. But it bought silence, time to shield her without open war. Eamon smirked. "And the Omega, she burns brighter than your crown. She's underright. Touch her and vineyards become ash." The deal sealed with blood-pricked thumbs, Corvin felt the fracture deepen, tenderness warring with domination, his humanity slipping for her safety. Myra watched from the stable loft later, hidden in hay-scented shadows, the pup curled against her side. Rowan's patrol circled below, but her resolve hardened like flint. The right echoed her past enslavement too perfectly, used, discarded. She'd find a way out, even if it meant allying with shadows or slipping poisons into the locks. Freedom or ruin, she'd choose. Corvin paused at the stable door, sensing her gaze through the gloom. Their eyes met across the distance, a breath-catching pause heavy with unspoken stakes. He wanted to shatter the right, offer choice, but the court circled like wolves. For the first time in centuries, his control cracked, not from hunger but from the terror of losing her to his own hand. She turned away, vowing silently, "I won't break for you." The palace walls closed tighter, binding them in escalating ruin. Myra's boots scraped the bloodstone floor as the guards shoved her toward the dais, the pup whimpering in her arms. Whispers slithered through the throne hall like venom. Asterisk Omega whore. Unfit for the crown asterisk. Lords and ladies leaning forward, their fangs glinting under torchlight. One noble, a gaunt vampire with kool-laced eyes, flung a gauntlet at her feet, the metal ringing accusation. "She taints the bloodline." Corvin's throne loomed at the hall's end, black iron claws gripping the air, but he sat unmoving, his face a mask of glacial command. Myra's chest tightened, the pup's tiny claws digging into her sleeve, the same desperate hold she'd craved as a newborn sold off by her pack. This right, this claim, stripped her bare before the court. No vows, no choice, just chains etched with ancient binding runes that would seal her as property. The high ritualist intoned the words, voice booming, "By fang and law, the Omega yields." "No," her refusal cracked out sharp, echoing off vaulted ceilings. Faces twisted, a lady spat, "Filth dare speak." The gaunt lord surged forward, his entourage murmuring asterisk treason, replace him now. Myra's vision blurred with the old wound ripping open, used, traded, owned. She twisted from the guard's grip, pup clutched tight, and bolted for the shadowed archway, skirts tearing on marble edges. Shouts erupted behind her, a tide of outrage crashing into the first murmurs of blades unsheathing. Corvin's fist clenched on the throne arm, splintering stone. Her flight ignited the hall, nobles shoving forward, the gaunt lord bellowing, "The king weakens. Seize the throne while she flees." It was the spark, a whispered coup blooming into open challenge, factions dividing before his eyes. His hunger gnawed deeper, not for blood but for the one thread of warmth she'd offered in stolen glances. Yet anger surged first, hot and familiar. He rose, voice slicing the chaos like a headsman's blade. "Captain Vale, execute the right of descent." Every voice raised against the claim forfeits tongue and title. Now. Rowan's wolves snapped to attention, but the captain hesitated at the throne's base, jaw tight. Corvin met his gaze, the order ironclad, punitive, cold, the weapon he'd wielded for centuries to crush rebellion. No pursuit of Myra, no softening. Control first always. The withdrawal burned in his veins, repeating the pattern. Push away to protect, bind tighter to hold. But as blood sprayed from the first silenced lord, guilt twisted. Her fear mirrored his own isolation, and he just chained it deeper. Myra burst into the stables, heart slamming, the pup's whines mirroring her own stifled sobs. Traded again. Affection's just the leash. Corvin's eyes across the gloom earlier, hungry, cracking, had promised more, but the right crushed it. Chaos roared from the hall, screams, wet thuds of enforcement. She yanked a saddle onto the nearest mare, stuffing pouches with dried meat and the pup's blanket. Footsteps pounded, Rowan bursting through the door, wolves flanking but not seizing. "Go," he growled, tossing her a cloak and dagger. "The king's order blinds him. Wilds are your only shot. Head north past the thorn wall. I'll cover the tracks." She froze, mistrust flaring. "Why, your loyalty." "Breaks tonight." His eyes flicked to the hall's glow where Corvin's justice unfolded. "He saved my kin once, but this recreates monsters. Move." He boosted her onto the horse, the pup scrambling up her back. Hooves thundered out the postern gate as alarms wailed, Rowan bellowing diversions to his wolves. "Secure the perimeter, intruders from the east." Corvin stormed the stable moments later, the air thick with horse sweat and betrayal's sting. Rowan knelt amid scattered tack, head bowed. "She rode north, sire. I enforced the outer watch." "Liar." Corvin's hand shot out, hauling the captain up by the collar, fangs inches from throat. Blood still flecked Rowan's armor from the hall's cull, the gaunt lord's head rolling, titles stripped in sprays of red. But the rift gaped, Rowan's defiance, first crack in centuries of iron loyalty. "You aid her flight." "Why?" Rowan's voice held steady, eyes unyielding. "Because your protection chains her like the pack that sold her. I've read the archives. You claim to save, but you bind. She's gone, and if you hunt, you lose us all." The words struck like fangs to the heart. Corvin released him, staggering back against a stall. The court howled beyond, coup whispers quelled but loyalty fracturing. His decision's cost laid bare. Rowan, saved by his hand long ago, now paid the price of truth. And Myra, fleeing into wilds that devoured Omega's whole. His methods, law as lash, control as cage, had replicated her wound. Abandonment masked as ownership. For the first time, the throne felt like a pyre, centuries of solitude roaring back. He sank to one knee, the terror absolute, not of losing power, but of driving away the one who might have thought it. Miles into the Thornwall snarl, Myra urged the mare through brambles that clawed like fingers, the pup shivering against her neck. Rain lashed down, turning earth to mire, but freedom's bite was sharper than fear. No belonging, no chains. The palace's distant torches faded, yet Corvin's gaze haunted, cracked, starving. She'd run before he could own her fully, but the emptiness echoed her birth, traded, alone. Dawn clawed the horizon, wild swallowing her whole, conviction hardening. She'd survive, pup in arms, never bowing again. Corvin stood alone in the stable's gloom, Rowan's footsteps retreating into the night. The rift pulsed, court intrigue festering from his hand. His attempt to save had shattered her trust, recreated the abandonment she fled. The king who bent empires knelt broken, hunger twisting to grief, tenderness lost to domination's grasp. Blood sprayed across the throne's obsidian arm as the assassin's blade grazed Corvin's throat. He caught the wrist mid-strike, fangs bared, and snapped it with a twist that echoed through the vaulted hall. The attacker, a wiry vampire from Lord Draven's faction, reeking of silver-laced venom, gasped, eyes wide with fanatic zeal before Corvin drove him to his knees, the court frozen in a hush of silk and steel. "Speak," Corvin snarled, his voice a low thunder that pinned the assembly. The hall's chandeliers flickered, casting jagged shadows over nobles who shifted like prey scenting a storm. Draven's spies had grown bold, their whispers of rebellion now steel in hand, aimed at the king who claimed an Omega without the full binding right. The assassin spat blood, grinning through shattered teeth. "The forest bitch weakens you. Draven says end the farce, kill her, reclaim the law's purity, or we carve the throne from your bones." Corvin's grip tightened, hunger roaring in his veins, but he saw it clear. Draven's gambit. Strike at him through Myra, force the ancient claim into ironclad completion, or shatter his rule. Bind her fully, turn her by force of ritual, and crush the dissenters under unified power. Or protect her openly, risk the court's fracture, and bare his throat to the wolves he commanded. He hurled the assassin aside, the body crumpling against marble pillars etched with blood oaths. Silence gripped the throne room, heavier than chains. Corvin rose, black cloak pooling like spilled night, his gaze sweeping the sea of pale faces, loyalists pale with fear, Draven's allies smirking in the wings. "No more," he declared, voice cutting the air like a blade. "The claim on Myra Thane ends. I renounce it here before the blood compact." Gasps rippled, ancient law-bound monarchs to property rights over claimed Omegas, a clause forged in the great feeding to prevent wars over mates. Revoke it, and the throne's foundation cracked. Lord Draven stepped forward, silver rings glinting on his fingers. "Highness, this defies the compact. An unbound Omega in our midst invites chaos. Draven's faction demands the right's completion." Corvin's eyes locked on him, cold as grave frost. "Then challenge me, Draven. Or accept this, she stands as partner, not property. Voluntary bond, shared governance. I yield unilateral control. Prove your loyalty or join the assassin." The court erupted, murmurs swelling to shouts, but Corvin's black wolves, led by Rowan's shadow at the edges, growled low, fangs flashing. Draven paled, bowing stiffly as the tide turned. Corvin felt the weight lift, then crash back. Centuries of iron rule traded for this gamble. Loneliness clawed deeper, the throne's isolation now a chasm. Guards dragged Myra into the hall then, her wrists unbound but her chin high, eyes storm-dark with defiance. Rowan flanked her, his face a mask of grim resolve, the pup tucked under his arm, her scruffy rescue now court contraband. She halted before the dais, scent of pine and earth cutting through incense, her gaze meeting Corvin's without flinching. "You heard," he said, descending the steps, voice softening for her alone amid the stairs. Power thrummed in his blood, but he knelt to her level, the king abasing before the Omega. "No claim, no binding without your word. I've starved for connection longer than you've breathed. Myra feared losing control so long I became the monster, but not with you. Walk away and the gates open." Her breath caught, fists clenching at her sides. The court watched, a noose of eyes, but she saw the fracture in him, the tremor in his ancient hands, the raw plea behind gold-flecked irises. He'd shattered his own chains for her, revoked the law that made her chattel. Yet trust was a blade she'd wielded alone too long, abandoned, sold, used. Stubborn fire lit her chest. "Words bend like reeds," she said, voice steady, carrying to the hall. "Prove it. Grant me legal autonomy, mine and the pup's. No rituals, no oversight. Let us choose, or this is dust." Silence fell, thicker than blood. Draven hissed from the sidelines, but Corvin nodded once, sharp. "Granted. Scribes alter the right. Mutual consent only, etched in the compact tonight." He rose, signaling officials. Punitive wardens dismissed. "Lord Vesper, your silver cells empty by dawn." Rowan exhaled, stepping forward with the pup wriggling free to Myra's feet. "And me, Highness, for defying the claim." Corvin's gaze softened fractionally. "Pardon, Captain. Your mercy saved us both." A small figure emerged then from the wings, Elias, the court's mute ward, a boy of 10 with hollow cheeks and wide eyes, clutching a tattered wolf pelt. Rowan had smuggled him food before. Now the child knelt by the pup, fingers tentative, a spark of wonder breaking his silence's shell. Myra watched, heart twisting. The pup nuzzled Elias' hand and the boy smiled, first she'd seen. Found family flickered here, fragile as candle flame. Her, the king, Rowan, these castaways. Scars lingered, her abandonment's echo, his throne-won guilt. But law now bridged the gulf, choice their tether. Corvin extended a hand, not commanding, waiting. Enough. She took it, grip firm, pulse racing against his cool skin. For now. The court parted as they turned toward the archways, wolves shadowing, intrigue simmering but checked. Reform's path stretched shadowed ahead, power imbalance carved down by decree and will. Together, scarred and choosing, they stepped into it, belonging tentative, hard-won, alive.